Okay, this week we're going to look at Hill and Others, chapter 15, which is on page 147. The chapter is called Identifying Mismatches in Secondary Communication. Identifying mismatches in secondary communication. So let's read together the story on page 147 called A Difficult Request, and then look at the discussion that follows. A difficult request. Peter and John were having breakfast one morning when Peter received a thick envelope from Pastor Anthony. Peter tucked it away as it looked like he would need a good bit of time to read it. That evening, they were relaxing after supper, and Peter opened the envelope. Said Peter as he read the letter. He's giving me a hard job here. Pastor Anthony has never learned our language, but he's very concerned about the situation with Brigitte. He's written me this letter in English, but now he needs me to translate it in Bengolan, so she'll really understand what he's trying to say. Peter got some sheets of paper and settled down to do the job. Peter started writing, but after a few minutes he crossed out what he was writing and tried again. Having problems? Asked John. Well, said Peter, I keep having to remember that this letter is addressed to Brigitte, not me. When I read, you should be sure to come and see me as soon as possible. For 1 minute, I thought he meant that I should go and see him. Then I realized, of course, he is speaking to Brigitte. Then I have another sort of problem. He has quite different ideas from mine, and I've got to think of what he was thinking when he wrote the letter. Listen to this, for example. I know that Veronica has special powers. Remember that this can be dangerous, and say your prayers every day. You see my problem? What does he mean by special powers? There are 2 or 3 words we could use for this in Bengolan, but I've got to work out which one Pastor Anthony means. Yes, it is very difficult, John commented. You have to try and decide what he was thinking when he wrote the letter, and this is very hard. Maybe you should try to phone him. Okay, so now we're at the discussion. Discuss reasons you think Peter was having trouble translating Pastor Anthony's letter to Brigitte into Bengolan. So pause the video and discuss now reasons you think Peter was having trouble translating Pastor Anthony's letter to Brigitte into Bengolan. So pause the video. Okay, so primary communication is when communication is given directly. Secondary communication is when there is another audience listening into the communication. Okay, so being the secondary audience can be challenging because one has to understand the original audience's context and what the original speaker or author intended to be understood. However, we take on this challenge every time we open Scripture. If we don't do this, it's possible that we are misunderstanding and misinterpreting Scripture. There was an original audience and original context. We are secondary. Hill and others write that we look for context where we share knowledge. Okay, we look for context where we share knowledge between the primary and the secondary. So, for example, in our story, Peter didn't know what type of special powers Pastor Anthony was talking about because they did not share that context. Until Peter learns this information, that context is not shared and meaning is misunderstood. In the same way, there will be there will certainly be context we don't share with the original audience of the scriptures. We must get to know their context to lessen the chances of misunderstandings and misinterpretations. So, sometimes the context is mismatched in that, number one, it is not recognized as a concept at all. You might not recognize it as a concept at all. Number two, an unintended context is accessed and the context is misunderstood. So you might think it's something else. Number three, there is no shared context at all with the original audience. So, have there been any concepts in your translation work where the context has been totally foreign to you? If so, what have you done to help your audience understand the intended meaning? So, I want you to think about that and share with me if there has been something that has been totally foreign in your translation, and what did you do about it? Translate the following statement into Swahili and into Kikurewe. Translators need to be able to identify the kinds of contextual mismatches their audience experiences to be able to adjust them. This phrase, you can find this phrase on page 154. Translators need to be able to identify the kinds of contextual mismatches their audience experiences to be able to adjust them. Okay, so translate that and get back to me with your assignment of what you do about foreign concepts. All right.